Have you ever noticed something that almost feels unsettling once you really think about it? How two people can live completely different endings to their lives, even if they started in similar places. One reaches 95, still walking their neighborhood, still laughing with friends, still remembering every grandchild's name, while another begins to decline somewhere in their early 70s, slowly losing strength, clarity, and independence. And here's the part most people never hear, the part that should make you lean in a little closer. After more than 3 decades in medicine, I can tell you with complete certainty, it's not just luck, and it's not just genetics. There's something else quietly shaping those outcomes, something most people overlook until it's far too late. The individuals who live the longest, the ones who stay mentally sharp, physically capable, emotionally present well into their 90s, they share one quiet, almost invisible advantage. Their bodies have managed to avoid a specific set of diseases that silently shorten most lives after 60. And today, I want to walk you through 5 of those conditions, the very ones that take away millions of Americans' final decades. Because if you've made it this far without them, your body may already be telling a story that's far more extraordinary than you realize. But here's the catch. Most people misunderstand what that really means. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you may never look at your own aging the same way again, and you'll begin to see signals in your body that you might have completely ignored until now. Let's start with the one condition I've seen end more lives than almost anything else in my entire career. And what I'm about to say might surprise you. Heart disease. Now pause for a moment and really consider this. If you've reached your 60s or even your 70s without being diagnosed with heart disease, you've already done something incredibly rare. You've crossed the single highest barrier standing between you and a life that stretches toward 100. That's not an exaggeration. Heart disease remains the #1 killer of older Americans, but the real reason why goes deeper than most people ever stop to consider. Because your heart isn't just a pump pushing blood through your body. It's more like a master clock, quietly keeping time for every single system that depends on it. And when that clock starts to falter, everything else begins to drift with it. Energy drops, memory softens, recovery slows. But here's where people get it wrong. Most imagine heart disease as something sudden, something dramatic, a heart attack that strikes without warning, like a bolt out of the blue. That's the story we tell ourselves because it feels easier, but the truth is far more subtle and far more dangerous. It builds slowly, quietly, over decades. Tiny deposits of plaque begin forming along the inner walls of your arteries, so small you'd never feel them. Year after year, those deposits grow, narrowing the pathways your blood depends on. Blood pressure inches upward, almost imperceptibly at first, placing more and more strain on the vessel walls. And your heart adapts. It works harder, then harder again, until one day, what once felt effortless begins to require effort you can't ignore. And here's the part that should make you stop and think. This entire process can unfold without a single obvious symptom. No pain, no warning, just time quietly being taken from you. But if you've reached your 70s and your heart is still strong, still steady, still doing its job without struggle, that tells me something powerful about you. It means your blood vessels have retained their flexibility, something many people lose decades earlier. It means your circulation is still efficient, still delivering oxygen and nutrients exactly where they need to go. It means your body has managed stress and inflammation in a way that most simply haven't. And that's not random, that's a pattern. I remember a patient of mine, I'll call him Walter, who came in to see me at 81. Nothing dramatic, just a routine checkup, but what I found stayed with me. He had never experienced a heart attack, not once. He had never needed a stent, never been placed on blood pressure medication. And when I examined his arteries, I had to pause, because what I was looking at didn't match his age. They looked decades younger, almost as if time had moved more slowly for him. I remember leaning back and asking him, genuinely curious, "Walter, what's your secret?" And he didn't answer right away. He sat there for a moment thinking, almost as if he'd never been asked that question before. Then he looked at me and said something I've never forgotten. "Doc, I just never gave my heart a reason to quit on me." Simple words, but there was depth behind them. He walked every morning, not fast, not intensely, just consistently. He ate simple foods, nothing extreme, nothing trendy. He kept his temper in check, didn't carry stress longer than he had to. And he laughed. Often. That was it. No complicated plan. No extreme routines. Just quiet consistency, repeated over years. And here's something most people don't realize. You don't have to be perfect to protect your heart. You just have to be consistent. Even gentle movement, walking through your neighborhood, tending to a garden, stretching in the morning light, keeps your blood flowing and your arteries flexible. The foods you choose matter too. Whole foods rich in fiber and natural fats help protect against the buildup that silently narrows your arteries. But there's another factor people underestimate: emotional stability. The ability to let go of stress instead of holding on to it. Because every time you carry stress longer than necessary, your body releases cortisol, and over time, that hormone can damage your cardiovascular system faster than almost anything you eat. Now here's a question you might not have asked yourself. If you've avoided heart disease up to this point, what does that say about the way your body has been handling life all these years? It's something worth thinking about. But don't get too comfortable just yet, because this is where many people make a critical mistake. They assume they're in the clear, and that's when problems begin to creep in unnoticed. Even in your 70s, conditions like silent hypertension or irregular heart rhythms can develop without any obvious warning signs. No pain, no dramatic symptoms, just subtle shifts happening beneath the surface. That's why monitoring matters more than most people think. Keeping an eye on your blood pressure, your cholesterol levels, your resting heart rate. These aren't just routine checks. They're your early warning system. They're the small habits that protect everything you've built so far. Because your heart doesn't just determine how long you live, it determines how well you live. When it's strong, your energy remains steady throughout the day. Your mind stays clear, your memory sharp, your mood balanced, resilient. And here's something we haven't talked about yet. What happens when the heart is fine, but something else quietly begins to fail? That's where the next condition comes in. And what it does to the body is something most people never see coming until it's already taken hold. Avoiding heart disease isn't just good fortune, it's proof that your body is still keeping pace with life itself. But what most people never stop to consider is that this isn't random at all. It's a signal, a quiet biological message that your internal systems are still coordinated, still responding correctly, still resisting the slow breakdown that takes so many others. And that brings me to something I believe is the most underestimated threat to longevity in America today. Something that develops so quietly, so gradually, that by the time most people realize it's there, the damage has already been unfolding for years. Diabetes. Now listen carefully, because if you've reached this stage of life without diabetes, your body has preserved one of its most precious and fragile defenses: metabolic balance. And I want you to really sit with that for a moment, because metabolic balance isn't just about sugar numbers on a lab report. It's about whether every single cell in your body is still listening to the right signals, still responding the way nature designed it to respond. Diabetes doesn't just raise blood sugar in isolation, it quietly damages blood vessels, nerves, kidneys, eyes, and even the brain, all at the same time, all in the background, without dramatic warning in its earliest stages. It accelerates aging in every organ simultaneously, as if the body is being pushed forward in time faster than it should be. And what I've noticed over decades of practice is something that most people completely miss. The patients who reach their 80s and 90s free of diabetes share a very specific quality. Their bodies still know how to listen to themselves. Not just physically, but metabolically. There's a kind of internal communication still intact. A responsiveness that so many others lose without even realizing it. And here's where it becomes even more important. Diabetes doesn't begin the day it's diagnosed, not even close. It begins years, sometimes decades earlier, in silence, when cells slowly start losing their sensitivity to insulin, the hormone responsible for allowing sugar to enter cells and be converted into energy. At first, nothing feels wrong. You eat, you function, you live your life. But underneath that normal surface, something is changing. Sugar begins to linger longer in the bloodstream. It doesn't clear as efficiently as it once did. Over time, that excess glucose thickens the blood, slows circulation, and places strain on nearly every system it touches. It's not an instant collapse. It's a slow takeover, almost invisible, almost patient, until it's not. I remember a man named Harold, 84 years old, and when I first met him, there was something almost unusual about him in the best possible way. No medications, clear blood work across the board, no long medical history of chronic illness. And yet what struck me most wasn't just his lab results, it was his presence, steady, calm, almost self-aware in a way many younger patients weren't. He told me he had never counted a single calorie in his entire life, but he lived by one simple rule that he said he never consciously thought of as medical advice. It was just how he lived. Eat until you're satisfied, not until you're full. And when he said it, he didn't say it like a philosophy. He said it like a habit that had quietly shaped his entire life. He avoided sugary drinks without obsessing over it, kept his portions modest without restriction, stayed consistently active through yard work that kept him outdoors and engaged, and long evening walks that he described as his way of thinking through the day. And then I asked him something I've asked hundreds of patients over the years. What's your secret? He smiled slightly, almost amused by the question itself, and said, Dr. Brooks, I just never fed my body things that made it fight against itself. And in that moment, there was a kind of silence that followed, because that one sentence, as simple as it sounds, captures more about metabolic health than many pages of clinical research ever could. Because avoiding diabetes doesn't just protect blood sugar, it protects everything downstream from it. High blood sugar stiffens arteries, strains the kidneys, damages small blood vessels in the eyes, and significantly raises the risk of cognitive decline, including dementia. That's why people who remain diabetes-free into later life often show something remarkable: clearer thinking, stronger cardiovascular function, and more stable vision well into their later years. Their vascular systems stay more flexible, their energy doesn't swing wildly up and down, and their body's repair mechanisms continue functioning in a way that feels steady, almost resilient. But here's something I need you to hear clearly. Prevention doesn't end at 60 or 70, or any age you might assume is too late to matter. Even if you've avoided diabetes this far, your choices still carry weight every single day. Balanced meals built around whole grains, lean proteins, and a wide variety of vegetables help keep insulin levels more stable. Staying hydrated supports every metabolic process happening in your bloodstream right now. Maintaining a healthy weight reduces strain on insulin signaling pathways, and getting enough quality sleep, something so many people underestimate, plays a direct role in how your body regulates sugar from one day to the next. All of these factors work together, quietly, continuously, shaping whether your system stays in balance or begins to drift. Diabetes is one of the great thieves of longevity, not because it appears suddenly, but because it takes time from you without asking permission. And the fact that you don't have it right now, that alone means something important. It means your body is still working with you, not against you, still responding, still cooperating, and that partnership, that biological agreement, is something worth protecting every single day you wake up. And if you're still watching and finding this meaningful, stay with me here. Because what comes next is something most people don't think about until it's far too late, and it can change a life in a single instant. If you're following along, you already know why this matters, and I don't want you to miss what I'm about to explain. Now let's keep going. The third condition I want to talk about is one that doesn't build slowly over decades the way diabetes does. Instead, it often changes everything in a single moment, without warning, without rehearsal, without permission. Stroke and circulatory disease. And if you've lived this long without experiencing a stroke, a mini stroke, or a serious circulatory event, then you've already crossed one of the most dangerous thresholds of aging that exists. Because strokes don't just end lives, they transform them instantly. In a single moment, a person can lose speech, mobility, memory, or the ability to live independently, and nothing about that moment feels gradual to the person experiencing it. The fact that you haven't faced one yet tells me something very important about your vascular system. Your blood vessels, your blood pressure regulation, and your cerebral circulation are still functioning in a way that closely resembles what nature intended, even after decades of use and stress. A stroke occurs when blood flow to part of the brain is suddenly interrupted, sometimes because a clot blocks a vessel, and sometimes because a weakened artery ruptures, spilling blood into brain tissue. Either way, the danger is not only the event itself, but the chain reaction it triggers inside the brain within minutes. But if you've avoided these events so far, it reflects something deeper than chance. It reflects resilience in your internal vascular system. I once had a patient named Ruth, 86 years old, and she had this quiet, almost steady rhythm to her life that you could feel just by observing her. Every morning, she walked half a mile without fail, not fast, not forced, just consistent, like breathing. And every night, she spent about 15 minutes in what she called her quiet time before bed. No screens, no background noise, just stillness, deep, slow breathing. as if she was resetting something inside herself before sleep. Her doctor before me had once told her something I still remember clearly. "Ruth, your arteries are softer than most people 30 years younger than you." And when I asked her how she thought that was possible, she didn't talk about medicine or diets or anything complicated. She simply said, "I never let anger spend the night." And that's not just wisdom, that's physiology. Because chronic stress keeps blood vessels constricted and accelerates plaque buildup over time, while calm emotional regulation supports healthier circulation and even allows for repair processes to function more effectively. And the science behind that is well established, even if most people don't think about it in those terms day to day. Avoiding stroke also often means you've managed blood pressure more successfully than average, whether through lifestyle choices, medication, or a combination of both. And that matters deeply, because hypertension is called the silent killer for a reason. It rarely announces itself with pain or obvious symptoms until significant damage has already occurred. By keeping it stable, you've protected not just your brain, but your kidneys, your eyes, and your heart as well. Your blood vessels can still expand and contract efficiently, delivering oxygen exactly where it's needed, when it's needed. And there's something even more fascinating here. Circulation doesn't just support survival, it shapes the quality of aging itself. People with strong, consistent blood flow often experience what looks like graceful aging, but what it really reflects is organ-level efficiency. Their muscles recover faster, their thinking stays clearer, their hands stay warmer, and their hearts respond better after exertion. Avoiding circulatory disease, then, isn't just fortune. It's one of the clearest visible signs that your internal infrastructure is still intact, still strong, still capable of sustaining you for years to come. And if your vascular system has remained healthy this long, then your path forward is wider open than most people ever realize. But now I need to take you into something even more unsettling, something many people think about quietly, but rarely understand clearly. Because after diabetes and stroke, there is another condition that carries enormous weight in how we think about aging, fear, and longevity: cancer. Every single day, even in perfectly healthy people, something extraordinary is happening inside the body. Something most people never think about, never feel, and never realize is even occurring. Small clusters of abnormal cells can appear without warning, not just once in a while, but constantly, as part of the natural process of cellular activity. And here's the part that should immediately make you pause. Most of those abnormal cells never become anything dangerous at all. They are detected, isolated, and destroyed before they can ever grow into a threat. That is your immune system at work, silently patrolling your body like a highly trained security force, scanning, identifying, and eliminating problems before you ever feel a single symptom. And when you really think about it, that system is running right now inside you, without rest, without recognition, without applause. But as we age, that surveillance system naturally begins to slow down, not because it disappears, but because time affects everything in the body, even its defenses. And yet, if you've reached your 70s or even your 80s without a major cancer diagnosis, that tells me something very important about you. It suggests your internal defenses are still awake, still alert, still responsive in a way that many people never manage to preserve. And I think about a woman named Margaret, who lived to 101 years old, and what makes her story so unforgettable isn't just her age, it's what she consistently said when people asked her how she managed it. She would always respond the same way, almost as if she wasn't giving advice, but simply describing her reality. "I never let bitterness take root in my body." And at first, people thought it was poetic, maybe even symbolic. But she meant it in a much more literal, physical sense than most people realized. Because today, we understand something she somehow lived by instinct. Chronic stress, unresolved anger, and prolonged inflammation don't just affect your mood, they actively suppress immune function, creating an internal environment where abnormal cells have a greater chance to grow unchecked. And Margaret's life reflected the opposite of that environment. Her calm emotional state, combined with simple daily habits like a diet rich in vegetables, herbal teas, and regular exposure to sunlight, helped support an immune system that remained vigilant far longer than most of her peers. But avoiding cancer is never just about one factor. It's also deeply connected to the choices you made earlier in life, and sometimes just as importantly, the choices you didn't make. Not smoking, not relying heavily on alcohol or avoiding it altogether, not ignoring routine screenings when they were recommended, And over the years, I've noticed a pattern in the patients who remain cancer-free into advanced age. They share one quiet but powerful trait. They pay attention, not in an anxious or obsessive way, but in a steady, responsible way. They notice small changes in their bodies early. They don't ignore subtle signals, and they continue showing up for preventive care, even when they feel completely fine, because they understand something critical. Cancer caught early is often a completely different story than cancer found late. And if you've avoided cancer this far into life, it is not just luck. It reflects a combination of your lifestyle, your awareness, and your body's ability to maintain balance over decades. It means your cells are still following their natural rhythm, dividing when they should, repairing when they need to, and resting when the body requires recovery. That kind of internal harmony is not something to overlook, because it is exactly what gives the human body the potential to carry life far beyond what most people expect. And if you take anything from this, take this seriously. Protect it. Nourish it with real food, stable sleep, meaningful human connection, and genuine moments of joy, because in my experience, those are not small lifestyle details. They are some of the most powerful forms of long-term medicine a person can have. And if you're still with me, I want you to take a second and reflect on that. Because what I'm about to move into next is something most people underestimate completely until it begins to change their daily life in very noticeable ways. Now, let's continue. The fifth and final condition I want to talk about is one that is often overlooked in conversations about aging and longevity, yet it quietly determines how freely you can live every single day: chronic lung disease. If your lungs are still clear, your breathing still feels natural, and you've never been diagnosed with conditions like COPD, emphysema, or chronic bronchitis, then you are already ahead of a large portion of aging adults when it comes to long-term vitality. Because your lungs are not just another organ, they are the gateway to every cell in your body. Every heartbeat, every thought, every movement depends on the oxygen they deliver. And when they remain strong past 70, it suggests that your entire internal system is still functioning with a level of efficiency many people lose much earlier in life. Most people underestimate just how vulnerable the lungs become over time. Breathing feels automatic, effortless, something we assume will always work the same way it did when we were younger. But in reality, the lungs are delicate, living tissue, and like all tissue in the body, they change with age. The airways can lose elasticity, the small air sacs can become less efficient, and decades of exposure to pollution, infections, or smoking can leave behind microscopic scarring that slowly reduces oxygen exchange. Yet if you've reached your later years without chronic breathlessness, without persistent coughing, without repeated respiratory infections, then your lungs still retain something remarkable: flexibility and resilience that resemble much younger tissue. I remember a man I deeply admired. I'll call him Leonard, because he reminded me of someone I once knew very well, who lived to 102 years old. He didn't follow any complicated medical program, he didn't rely on supplements or special devices, and he never talked about biohacking or extreme health routines. But he did one thing without fail. Every single morning, no matter the weather, he went outside for a long walk, even in winter, even when it was inconvenient. And when I once asked him about it, he smiled and said something I'll never forget. "Dr. Brooks, lungs are like children. They behave well when you keep them busy." And interestingly, modern science supports what he discovered through experience. Deep, consistent breathing combined with regular physical movement helps keep the lungs expanded, improves air exchange in the lower regions, and supports better circulation throughout the entire chest cavity. At 90 years old, Leonard's lung function testing resembled that of a man in his early 60s. Not because of anything extreme, but because he refused to let his lungs become inactive. And here's something even more important. When your lungs function well, everything else benefits. The heart doesn't have to overwork to supply oxygen. The brain receives a steadier flow of oxygen, supporting clearer thinking and sharper focus. The immune system operates more efficiently because oxygen is essential for its response. And across populations, older adults with stronger lung capacity tend to recover faster from illness, sleep more deeply, and maintain better cognitive function. It is not a coincidence that many of the longest living populations in the world live in environments with cleaner air and lifestyles that naturally encourage movement outdoors. But even if your environment is not ideal, your habits still matter enormously.